How much of an opportunity does the iPad provide for your company as a marketing or sales platform? If you could vote now. So the highest score is 31% on number 4, so that's a pretty good platform. 11% really optimistic, 14% pretty gloomy. That's a good starting point for our conversation. Russell, are they right to rank it about this way, do you think?
Well, I think the most interesting thing is the diversity of the response, which actually reflects the question, which is that it's just the jury's still out. It's still early days. iPad's only sold about 500,000 models. Put that into perspective, the iPhone itself has sold about 90 million, and there are 4 billion mobile phones in the world. So it's actually a tiny bit of the market.
But how big is it going to get?
Well, we tend to, as a company, look at the numbers. So we started getting interested in iPhone when we could see that people were using it in a certain way, which is to use the mobile web for the first time on a mobile device, and also starting to use apps. So we started getting huge volumes of page requests, which allows us to serve more ads. So we would tend to take a view of sitting back and seeing what the numbers are like. At the moment, it's too small. To give you an example, we've served 15 billion ads in the last month, of which 10 million were on iPad. So we're seeing it. But the interesting thing is that sector, that mobile device sector, which isn't designed for phone calls, and by that I mean the iPod Touch as an example, the Sony PlayStation, the Wii, we're serving ads on those, and they currently take up about 20% of our network. So the category as a whole is actually very interesting. There's a lot of volume going on there. The iPad's the latest. Frankly, I think we're not going to see whether it's going to be a real game changer for at least another year till the initial glitches are removed, until obviously it goes sold on a wider geographical basis.
Of course, you're right. And there'll be a lot of buyers who are sitting back and waiting to see those glitches ironed out this time, I guess, before they buy. Do you think it's a fad or a fantasy?
I think it's interesting when you consider the format and what's happening, where I think that content producers, and it's interesting, and with that I mean also brands and what brands are doing in the content space as well. I think content producers, publishers in particular, are very interested to understand what the iPad offers them. I think that people are trying to figure out what is the opportunity relating to it in relation to something that is very difficult to categorize. It's somewhere between the iPhone, somewhere between the notebook. I think it represents huge opportunities, particularly in the portable video content space. We're a company at Adconium where we're moving very much into the development of content and distribution of that content across lots of different platforms. So from our perspective, I think that while we remain optimistic about the advertising play, I think what's interesting about it is actually the ability to develop content and distribute that not only across the web but also onto iPhones and onto a larger format, particularly around video in a very portable way, is very appealing for brands. And I think there's a huge amount of opportunity for brands to reach customers in a way that they haven't been able to before.
And those video ads are incredibly effective on the iPad, aren't they? And I thought they will be attractive. Do you think so, Simon?
Yeah, I think the video thing is extremely advantageous for marketers and for media companies that can perform well in that area. What's, I think, very scary for print publishers, which they didn't really realize when they started creating these sort of ported versions of their publications, newspapers and magazines, is that if you're a 15-year-old kid or a 25-year-old with your iPad, you suddenly have this leveled playing field where it's like, oh, wow, this awesome game that I paid $5 for versus, Netflix, the movie rental service that has an iPad app in the States. And, Hulu is rumored to be coming out with, a video app. There's all this great other content. And then, you look at newspapers, and some magazines are doing this. Some have had, video production capabilities for years now, and they've been doing this on their websites. But nobody's particularly good at it. And I particularly cringe when I look at newspaper websites and I see sort of the dorky reporters who, are probably best behind the keyboard suddenly having to do, 2 minutes of video, and it gets very cringeworthy. And, you stack that kind of media experience up versus the awesome video game with the, touch sensitive and the accelerometer kind of stuff. It's like, how many people in the target demo are going to be paying $5 for that traditional media experience, even if it's sexed up with a little video?
Traditional newspapers know that their readers do like to use video online. They've just got to get a lot better about doing it.
Much better, yeah.
Russell, have they got a long way to go, or do you think they should just not bother actually and buy in?
Well, I think one of the interesting things which we're seeing in terms of video is the overwhelming uptake of video by the advertising community at the moment, particularly for iPhone, where you can create a very seamless experience. And I'll show where the industry is at tomorrow in my presentation about how we got from where we are today to where we are now. And you'll see that in the last 10 years, the industry's changed completely from basically text messages through to full-blown integrated video, where it'll reformat, repurpose itself, and you can get a very great experience. The difference really between the iPad and the iPhone in that respect is one you hold on your lap and one you hold in your hand. And in terms of visual impact, you get exactly the same because it is the same experience. So I think for perhaps for the foreseeable future, like the next year or so, the people who are going to be using video most on the iPad as an extension of the iPhone and other mobile devices is going to be the advertising community rather than the media publishers themselves.
Neat plug for Russell's session tomorrow. I hope you're paying attention. Meanwhile, any questions for the panel on the iPad? All satisfied users out there?
I think while we're waiting for the question, I think one of the points that you made earlier, Simon, around one of the fundamental differences in Apple's business and in the advertising business is they've been able to do something which a lot of media companies have not been able to do, which is create the reason for the billing relationship between the technology provider and the device or the publisher or whatever it may be. So I think when we start talking about how the opportunity that this presents to publishers, all of a sudden you're in a space that's already proven that people will pay for content, whether it be a movie, whether it be premium content or whatever it may be. So I think while the jury's out as to what the pricing model will be, and there's going to be huge inertia around the paid-for content model, I think that here's a very interesting situation where you have consumers conditioned that actually, you know what, and I'll put my hands up before, I would just rip off music from a friend or something like that. Now I just don't have the time, and you know what, if I want an album, I'm just going to buy it on iTunes. So I think that's going to be very interesting when it comes to movies, sitting in the airport stranded, you know what, I'm just going to go and buy a box set of Entourage or whatever it may be as well. So I think there's this shift in how people are using technology, and I think that the iPad with a larger format, because I'm not going to look at that on my iPhone, but I probably would on my laptop, but I don't really want my laptop. So that form factor, like you said before, I think is very interesting, and it's going to actually, going to be the device where I will pay for content, probably for the first time in volume.
Yeah, I think it's also worth adding, though, that while obviously some people are buying content via the iPhone, the vast majority of iTunes downloads are via apps, and they're free apps. So while he's managed to train a certain small proportion of the population to pay for stuff, the vast majority of people still expect it for free. And so, I think you have to balance the two out.
Absolutely. Awesome. Some differing point of views. I think it's great. And then you get to the paid. Then you get to an advertising-funded model, which really relies on scale, targeting, optimization of the content, and then the advertising around that as well. And I think that's where the iPad falls down, and why it really represents just one arm of a broader content, advertising, distribution strategy. And that's where technology companies are really, I think, well placed if they can distribute the content and the advertising to an audience irrespective of what the device may be.